Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Forbes. I'm the California National Party chairman and host of Free the Bear.
Sure. So again, that would be all kind of key ingredients to make that happen. Then the other part too, though, is that a lot of people who are on food stamps or also need government assistance in a lot of ways, that does get tied into housing. That get tied
Oh,
into again
sure.
like rents and things like that. Now, rents right now, especially in the state of California, in any kind of large city in California, even like again now it's creeping out into like the smaller towns outside the coastal areas. Rents are completely out of control. There is no rent control. There is no rationalization. Again, it's just that they push it to the limit every single time. It is a completely greedy sector who has no concern for businesses or again people just trying to live in housing, and
Mhm.
that needs to be
It
brought to heel pretty fast.
is there a plan? Does CNP have a plan for implementing some sort of a rent control situation for
Yeah,
in the new nation state?
one
How does that look?
one of the first things that we do, for example, is that there is a law called actually I have to look it up because I must say either Costa Hawkins or Contra Hawkins. Give me 1 second.
Bless you.
Yeah, the Costa Hawkins Act, right? Not Contra Hawkins. I always screw that up. Costa Hawkins Rental Act. Basically, what that does is that the state of California has banned localities from actually enforcing any kind of rent control for buildings that are built after a certain point. So, like for example, like Santa Monica has some rent control because some of the buildings were not built, or a lot of the buildings were built before 1995. But
Mhm.
any kind of buildings are built after 1995, and also that even to set up a rent control regime in any kind of locality, the state has completely shut down the ability of localities to have any kind of like control over rents. So at this point, basically, the state is enforcing a law that's not exactly democratic, where, you know, let's just say Long Beach from where I'm at, or like San Francisco wants to have, more aggressive rent controls because their rents are going through the roof and they want to actually, pull back from that, this laissez-faire kind of like, see what the market does, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Well, that needs to be eliminated because I think localities actually do know what exactly is happening and they know exactly what's appropriate for rental. And
Mhm.
that's something else too, that there needs to be some sort of council between landlords, tenant unions, and then also again maybe the state where actually they can work out a plan where again rents make sense for again like yes, again we're still in a capitalist society. People want to go into business owning homes or owning, apartment communities. But again, this
Mhm.
kind of like runaway kind of idea that they can just do whatever they want, that needs to end immediately. And again, the state has fought tooth and nail, and that's usually, again, that is on the Democrats' plate because Republicans have nothing to do with that. Democrats have been the majority party, the majority of the California cabinet, which is, again, a lot of times directly elected. They've had all branches of government, including again the state Supreme Court, and have never cared about that, never done anything about it, and have just let that happen. And that's the reason why I'm sure that we have a lot of unhoused people, a lot of people who are probably just sleeping in their cars at night, still going to work, is because
Mhm.
there's no ability to rein in rents. And also the fact too is that we do have these, powerful conglomerates that actually run a lot of apartment communities with people don't recognize.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, these conglomerates just buy up whole blocks of buildings, apartments, houses, whatever, and yeah, it's purely for profit. There's no interest in actually providing decent housing people can afford. It's just simply for profit,
Yeah,
and pleasing shareholders, and that is just bullshit.
it is.
It's
I mean, it's just.
bullshit.
It's just. It gets into like I mean, like there's a term in economics, called rent sinking, which is like always used as a pejorative, which basically means that like it's a shakedown, right? It's basically
Yep.
people are going around to control a certain sector, and they're kind of sucking the resources they can out of it with no idea of like how much devastation that they're causing. And again, a lot of these big
Mhm.
conglomerates are no pun intended, are rent seeking, obviously, because they own these places. And again, they are extracting, I mean, we're talking about thousands upon thousands, millions of dollars per year. I mean, one of the The biggest ones is Essex Property Trust. They own, at least the last time I counted, about 128 different apartment communities up and down the West Coast. They have always been the biggest backer to shoot down any kind of rent control ideas because they have basically monopolized a lot of the area. They've actually taken out like a couple other major companies too. So like they're even a bigger monopoly than they were before. And again, no one has ever brought them to heel. No one has actually tried to enforce anything to make sure that the rents actually make sense. And again, that's the reason why you do have people who do fall into poverty is because they just can't keep up with the rent. And then what does that cause? It causes homelessness. That causes mental health issues because, gee, I just lost everything. Now I'm like sleeping in my car. Oh, my car got towed, so now I'm on the street. So yeah, what do I do next? Is like I'm just gonna go shoot up and then go stare at the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like all these things, like again, they have to be really tackled to make sure that we can avoid again the state taxpayer subsidizing bad economic policies done by private actors. And
Right.
again, that is a long way to explain what you were just or answering your question, but yeah, we have to have a multi-pronged thing, and so that is again pretty much the left side of the spectrum when it comes to CMP policy. That was traditional kind of left thing. Now, when it comes to other things, however, we do want to have something that I would say comes a little bit more from like the libertarian right, if we're going to get into these like labels. And one of the things that we want to do, and again, this kind of goes back to the rent question and rent control question, is that we do want to have a state, California, be decentralized. And this is something that can happen before full-blown independence from the federal government. We need to have a decentralized state. Right now,
What do you mean by decentralized state? Just to explain that to me, please.
basically what that would mean is that imagine California as it is right now before independence. However, we have states within the state.
Okay. Sort of like you have counties already.
Right. But like we have
Okay.
it like we kind of give another layer, which is like basically regions of counties.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
so, for example, like going towards like again the Nevada Arizona border, again San Francisco, Los Angeles,
You got north, south, east, west, like that.
kind of like that.
North,
Yeah,
north. Right. I got you.
we have about six regions that we want to actually put into play. That we actually want to make sure that actually they get most of the powers of the state. They actually would take back power for their areas because again, Sacramento, again using a one size fit all kind of thing doesn't really make sense. Again, like why would you have like a tax policy on, say, gasoline that it applies to the entire state when again, like gas use is very different in San Francisco as opposed to say like Inyo County, where Inyo County is the size of Massachusetts. There's no such thing as public transportation out there whatsoever, except for like a very small scale. If you're traveling from one town to another, it can literally take you about 80 miles. So again, why are we having this one size fit all kind of thing? That does not make sense whatsoever for, again, a state like us. Because again, we are a nation state. If you travel up north and you go from like, let's say your starting point was San Diego, then you go into Los Angeles, then you go into Santa Barbara County, then you go up, towards Monterey, you're already having the feeling that these are radically different places just to begin with. You don't, if you're just an alien dropped off at the corner of the 101 and you're just hitching rides, you would not believe that this is all part of one polity. This is all different states. And so we need to have, like you said, as a starting point where Sacramento can't just keep calling the shots for every little thing. Because, again, when you're talking about a small legislature, it's a legislature that's smaller than the state of Iowa's legislature. And they have centralized so much control into their hands. You also have it, too, that, for example, like LA County is bigger than so many different states. I mean, we're talking about 16 million people. And it has the powers of just a regular county. It has about 5 supervisors that are supposed to represent about, 16 million people. Again, how is that really conducive to actually like having any sense that like you have control of your life or anything like that when there's all these small power blocks that are actually running every little thing?
All right.
So
I just want to interrupt you real fast with a little bit of breaking news that I've just seen. We were talking about it earlier in South Korea. The president declared martial law.
yes.
South Korean lawmakers held a late night vote to defy the president, demanding an end to that martial law declaration. So that's it's heating up over there, and it doesn't necessarily affect your side of the world, but I'm right next door, so it's a bit worrisome, I guess you'd say.
I would say so,
Uh,
because I mean, again, it's been more or less a democracy since 1979, in that it's fallen into this kind of like political chaos. I mean, I can't believe like
mm.
again something that's been so stable and modernized is now like lurching towards whatever weird situation that is. I would just
I'm
say
just
that
wondering. I'm just wondering. Do you think North Korea is going to use this to sort of take advantage somehow, or
I
maybe even like Russia or somebody or China? Maybe use this as some sort of a fulcrum or a lever to do something
I don't know.
there.
I think it's just that they're so tied up. I mean, like they sent so many volunteers to the Russian front in the Ukraine, right? North Korea. I don't
Mm,
know if they could really do something because again, even like I think it's just the situation is just really unclear at the moment because like for example, it really depends who the military backs up in the end. You know, the lawmakers or the president, right?
right, right, right.
And I don't think North Korea is going to touch that in a second because again the ability for that to kind of shoot off. I mean, like the North Koreans, I think are much more afraid than we realize. And again, like they're paranoid, and I think that you know they're aggressive, but it's always been the aggression of just a weird person that is basically half psychotic, who's more of a danger to themselves than their other people around them.
Mhm.
And I think that they just would not be intervening as yet, but I'm sure that they're going to probably pump out a ton of propaganda about political chaos in the South.
Right, right. That's what I was thinking too. Another question
Mm.
along the same lines. Should CMP be successful in, the Cal exit endeavor? And I know would be obviously a situation by situation basis, but what would be say, for example, the war in Ukraine right now? What would be the position of a new California state? Whether in support or not in support, would you provide money for assistance, or would you provide I don't know, National Guard troops and something like that? Is
Well,
what would be the policies? What would that potentially look
sure.
like? I'm not asking for obviously,
Yeah, right. I
what
mean,
exactly would you do?
well,
I
again,
mean, would the new state, the new country take part in world events like that, or what?
it would. Now, our kind of go-to phrase when it comes to foreign policy, for example, is that we want to be the Switzerland on the Pacific, right? We
Right,
we
right.
want to be a neutral nation in a lot of ways. We don't
Hmm.
support the actions of the United States. I mean, like the U.S. has been very aggressive. Again, like from everything from Iraq to Gaza, the U.S. has been behind a myriad of bad actions, right? And
Since the beginning of time.
yeah, time immemorial, right?
Mm,
And I mean, the only thing that we would do is like our relationship with the United States would be like, okay, if there's an actual like direct attack on U.S. soil, say a
mhm.
Pearl Harbor 2.0 or something like that, we
Sure.
we would back up the United States. But these endeavors to go around the world and do God knows what with these imperialist actions, we don't support. And in the same time, too, we don't support the imperialist actions of Russia either. I mean,
Right.
Russia again went in there. I know there's always been this, fart noise saying that like, oh, it's because they're paranoid that NATO's expanding. They're getting too close to the border, blah, 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 which is kind of, that's a real push at this moment to really keep saying that because that shows that anyone who spouts that comment has no idea about how actually the US actually works or how NATO
Mm,
works. For
mhm.
example, like, oh my God, like the Ukrainians, they might go to NATO and that's why they had to attack first because again, they're getting so close to their border. Well, Alaska and Russia, how close is that? It's just like again, like Sarah Palin can see it from her house, kind of close.
All right. You can shoot bottle rockets into Russia, right?
Right. So again, that's one, and then two, it's like, how do you say there's like NATO encroachment when it's like we literally have ICBMs and we also have city buster submarines that float all over the world with targeting
Mm,
packages that can wipe out Russia in about 2 minutes.
mhm.
So again, like, don't, that was a BS play by Putin, who knows that but didn't care. He wanted to grab Ukraine because they want to keep in their sphere of influence and they want basically to drain it of natural gas and oil that it has. Plus, also again, Ukraine is kind of a breadbasket of Europe. I mean, like it has productivity almost on levels of like California when it comes to agriculture, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, he was just, it's a land grab and it blew up in his face. He thought it was going to be a cakewalk. He thought he'd get his, get all the way into Kiev, in 2 seconds. And,
But he thought,
it blew up in his face.
he thought he's up against, a comedian.
Yeah,
This,
he didn't respect him at all. And again, it's like,
Zelensky.
yeah, it's
I
just,
think he found out. I think he found out wrong. He's got egg on his face right now.
oh,
Putin
yeah,
does,
no, again, this is, again, a total miscalculation on his part. And so,
and
yeah,
he's so far committed now. I don't think he can. I don't think he feels like he can stop. I think he
no,
feels like he has to keep going to keep saving face.
well,
Right.
pretty much. And I think it's just what's going to happen, unfortunately, is that Trump is going to sell out the Ukrainians and they're going to have a BS peace deal.
Mhm.
And I do 100% believe that's going to be happening soon. But anyway, that being all said, I mean, like, yeah, we would back the Ukrainians just like we would back up anyone who is being aggressively attacked for no reason.
Right.
And, again, would
That's
that
good
be
to know.
troops on the ground kind of thing? No. But I mean, would that be, again, like support of like, millions of dollars in like, aid packages? Yes. I mean, the only thing I think the mistake the United States has made, at least maybe in explaining it or doing anything, is that it gets really discouraging for American citizens and California citizens to hear that Congress can just sign off in 2 seconds the $725 million or $1 billion here, $2 billion here for military aid to another country, right? Which again, they are attacked. They do need support. But why is Congress so eager to sign that check? But then we have homelessness in our country. We have all these major issues. Again, like, Flint, Michigan is still like can't drink its own water supply. We've had was it East Palestine railroad derailment again,
Yeah.
doing God knows what in that area. I mean, all these like other things we have problems at home, and again, they can sign the military check, but they can't sign the check to actually do anything here. And I think that always sticks with people pretty badly. And I think that's
Yeah.
part of the reaction. Like, it's not a sensible reaction in a way because again, there is a reason why we're backing up Ukraine, and it's not just like simply the U.S. boogeyman. But there is, I think, again, the right does hit upon the fact that, like, you spend all that money over there for a foreign country and you can't do a damn thing here.
Yeah.
And
That's always going to be
yeah, and it's
a
always going to look wrong.
sticking point.
And again, that's a legitimate point. I think it's just like, they should be a little bit
Absolutely.
easier with, like, you know, I mean, the right always makes, again, like, a snorting sound about, like, well, we got to take care of our veterans, even though they would never really sign something to actually do that. But, I think the average Republican wants to see that money to help out our vets or help out, again, like a lot of people here, as opposed to all of a sudden, like, sending up, drone weaponry to the Ukraine. So, again, I think that not California first per se, like would be our policy, but like, yes, we would help out other countries, but would also, again, if we're going to be willing to open up the purse strings, I think that we would actually try to open up for our own citizens. It would be actually a lot easier when we're not supporting red states or this whole military industrial complex.
Right. Right.
So, and that's, again, it's a little bit nuanced view. Yes, we support, but again, if we're going to open up $1 billion there, maybe $1 billion here at the same time too, or maybe $2 billion here, two for one. Who knows?
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah. So, again, like what it kind of comes down to is that California is being kind of milked dry for a lot of things. Again, like the military industrial complex. I mean, we're talking about an $850 billion defense budget, and that's purely for the Department of Defense. I don't think that counts in Homeland Security.
Hmm.
And again, how much of that is coming from California itself? It's not coming from Arkansas. It's not coming from, again, like Alabama. It's again coming
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
the fourth largest economy. We're feeding this machine. And that defense budget is so wildly like huge that, again, like, our adversaries, again, like the Chinese, right? I think their defense budget is like 350
Hmm.
billion. And I think the Russians are now peaked out at 90. And that's during the war where they're actually invading Ukraine. So we have overwhelming numbers. And again, like, we spend more money than the next top 10 nations combined. And most of those nations are actually allies of us.
For national security, and yet every week there's a school shooting, or there's a shooting in a mall, or
Yeah.
a shooting in a fucking gas station. What the fuck are they using this money for? National security, national defense. You're not defending anything inside the fucking borders. What
No,
the fuck?
no,
Sorry.
no, it's true. I mean, it's again, I think it's just basically money laundering at this point. I mean, it's basically they're buying things so that congressmen can look like they're tough on defense. They're buying things so these company stocks goes up. And again, like, they're maintaining employment in certain, important congressional districts, etc. And that's pretty much it. It's this big money laundering scheme because how can China, again, who rules over 1 billion people, can get away with about half of the defense budget?
Right.
So again, like, so that doesn't really kind of ring up true. And again, I think this is a lot of waste of money. And if California, for example, was going to do, percentage ratio wise, be paying like, we are paying right now, let's say we go independent, we'd probably be paying for our own defense budget if we were using the U.S. system about $90 billion a year. And it's already a hell of a lot. That's already, again, we just beat Russia during wartime.
Right.
So I think we could probably shave that down again, knock off another like 30 to 40 billion off of it, because obviously California's not going to be maintaining bases in Africa.
Mhm.
So yeah, we could use that
That
money for literally anything else again. Again, solving housing issues, solving again healthcare issues, solving again some of our environmental impact. Maybe turning around some of the defense budget and making sure our forests don't burn down.
that kind of that yeah, that sort of leads me into my next question. We're talking about defense budgets and all that stuff. I know that there are I don't know exactly how many, but I know there are lots of U.S. military installations in the state of California. What happens to those if, when CalExit is successful? Do you work out some deal with the existing federal government to lease those bases or lease the land that they're on, or how does that work?
That's a really good question. And again, I like to give like a flippant answer that can, put that together in 2 seconds. I would just say that there would have to be worked out some sort of deal because, again, having U.S. military just pack up, again, we do want to have that for California uses, but at the same time, too, again, would that be a reality in negotiation with the federal government? I'm not exactly sure.
Mhm.
I do know that, again, these properties are of importance, again, for multiple reasons. So yeah, there probably would be some sort of leasing, some sort of arrangement, some sort of treaty about how to use that. I mean, other countries do that with the United States all the time. I mean, that's
Mhm. Yeah,
basically
absolutely.
sort of Europe, Philippines, even Japan.
Yeah.
So we probably would have to have some sort of like system for that. But again, like, how far we go, how less we go, I don't exactly know. I mean, for example, there's certain areas that are probably just going to be kind of redundant. I think, like, for example, like, the Marine camps and things like that. They're more in the desert, things like that, where they do
Yeah.
training. They could do it somewhere probably else. But like San Diego, for example, with all its infrastructure, that would be probably a
Mhm.
tough one to kind of reorganize.
Yeah. And just a little bit of a follow-on question for that. If some arrangement was made and some leasing agreements were hammered out, um, what do you think that money would be used for within the state of California? Education, um, gun control? What sort of what could you put that money to use for that would be a good thing that you could say to the constituents of the state? Look, we're taking the money for leasing these bases and we're putting it into this so that you can actually see what it's going for. What would that thing be?
Well, I think that in the California National Party's vision, the first thing is that when it comes to these tax issues or money issues, a lot of this power that was going to Sacramento would be taken away. So Sacramento, for example, would still be, of course, the capital. Again, it would be basically the organizer of this Union of California States. And this is something
Mhm.
that could happen, after independence or even before independence. But again, basically with our decentralization idea, which people can look up at californiarevolution.info, we want to reorganize the state to be basically a federation of like states within the state. And
Mhm.
again, if we have savings, like for example, where you're just saying when it comes to these lease money or sale of land or anything like that, when these military installations, that should go to the region that is a part of that so that they can use it for their own local concerns.
Mhm.
Because again, I have a lot of ideas about what I would use that money for. I'm sure other people do, but again, does it really make sense for us to be like, haha, we got this cash, and then all of a sudden, like the localities that actually were impacted by those areas and bases don't have a say in the money just because they're
Right.
outvoted in an assembly.
Right. And you're basically reverting to the same system you have now
Yeah,
if you do it
exactly.
that way.
And again, that overly centralized kind of like state system cannot operate in California. California is a nation state. It needs to have the regional idea. And again, the regions, for example, they would have, again, a lot more say in what the money is used. Now, the central Sacramento government was put that way, would still have, promoting, again, healthcare and education, for example. So again, some money would still be peeled off towards that, but then the rest of the money, well, again, I don't know what the housing situation is in like, those certain counties. I don't know, again, what projects that they've been putting out for years because they couldn't get a vote through Sacramento. I don't know, again, they want to develop more solar power in those certain areas, but that's been shot down because we got to have solar power in, I don't know, Santa Monica or something like that.
Hmm.
So we would have to make sure again that like really that the regions that are impacted by that, they get first say over that. But again, like there's still a role for the national state government, which would be again when it comes to education, healthcare, things like that. Also, again, making sure that Newsom has had such a hell of a time trying to get anyone to do anything about housing that again housing should be probably the priority of a national state government to make sure that that actually happens as opposed
Right.
to as much as like we would like to give up power and like decentralize the government and have the regions have more control. A lot of these areas, unfortunately, they have the NIMBY effect, not in my backyard. And so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
everyone will be like, yeah, no, we support the idea of housing. But it's just like, well, what if we put public housing near here? Well, the demographics and I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a little bit tough here. Oh, we got to rezone
I
that
don't want
thing.
to look at those brown people.
It kind of gets into that without saying that,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Or just again, oh, again, my house in Marin, the value might go down by, $500,000 because all of a sudden there's, public houses up the way. It's like stuff like
Hmm.
that. So like there has to be some override. So there has to be again, it has to be a federalized system within the state of California. The central Sacramento government still has to have some priorities, but again, when it comes to a lot of stuff, it doesn't make sense to actually have everything run out of Sacramento. And also,
Right.
again, like, we want to make sure we break up the monopoly of Democratic power in this state because it's not like they've been doing a great job. Again, this is not
Sure.
like just an anti-Trump party. We're also anti-Democrats in Sacramento.